Hello, everybody, and welcome to another JBCI podcast and a special podcast because we haven't done these for a while, guys. It's been a little bit of time.
No.
We're back in M's library, and for those of you who are familiar and those of you who might not be familiar, M's library is where we take apart a Bond book. We've discussed Moonraker in the past and Live and Let Die, and this episode is a little bit different to what we've covered before because we've gone a little bit more up to date. Up to date as in probably the 1950s, because we're reviewing Anthony Horowitz's Forever and a Day. So we're going to talk about it. And if you got your books, there you go. Joining us as always, we have an esteemed panel of experts, knowledgeable Bond literary fans who have memorized this book inside and out. And we're going to talk about a little bit about the book, the plot, the characters, what we like, what we don't like, and anything else that comes along the way. So let's do some intros first. I'm going to start with Sean. Sean, you can say hi, but also, Sean, when you're saying hi, what was the first Bond book you remember reading since we're in M's library?
Very interesting. Hi, everybody. Yes, Sean O'Hare here. The very first Bond book I read would have been John Gardner's Cold. I picked it up in the local library. Couldn't believe there was a James Bond novel. There was a picture of a helicopter in the front of it. It just grabbed me straight away. I was already into Bond slightly, but I never heard of John Gardner. So yeah, that was my first experience of a literary Bond.
Excellent. Thanks, Sean. Also joining us is, we're delighted to say, Fraser Lockley is here. Fraser, how are you?
I'm good. Yeah, all good.
What was your first Bond book? Tell us.
It was Moonraker, and I was about 10 or 11. And I wasn't really into James Bond at all, which is weird because so I was into planes and stuff, so I wanted to be a pilot when I was younger. So I was reading Craig Thomas's Firefox, the book they made into the film. Oh, nice. I was reading that, finished that, tried to find the follow-up. Or another book to read, and then I saw Moonraker with a rocket on the cover. I thought, that'll do. Didn't even know it was a James Bond book, so I picked it up from the library. Absolutely blew my mind. Then realised there was more of it. So then you could pick up all the books cheap. So that's how I got into James Bond. That's it. Fantastic. Weird, isn't it? and then
what a great place to start. What a great place in Moonraker to start. I mean,
and I'm sort of so glad I didn't, pick up something later in the series because it puts a lot. There's a lot in that book that sets it up for later. It's good.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. Also with us, we're delighted to say Michael is our producer. Michael has also landed. Michael, what was your first Bond book?
Hello everyone.
Hello.
As far as I know, I think my first Bond book was Casino Royale, which I would have read in second year in secondary school when I was about 14. And at that point, I was just getting into kind of Bond, and as any 14-year-old does, with the disposal of the internet, Google's everything to do with James Bond. You find out there are books, you buy the first book, you read the first book. Poor Michael at 14 was very confused by basically half the books in French, didn't know what was going on, but I thoroughly enjoyed it and then proceeded to absolutely tear my way through Ian Fleming's biography, not really understanding what was going on because I was just kind of reading them at a breakneck pace. And it's only in recent years going back, like reading them, I kind of understand, this is all very good,
Excellent. Cool. And my first one actually was Dr. No, which was a funny one to find, but I was kind of following, I think, the movies at the time when I got it, and I got it in a little flea market in Southsea of all places over in the UK one Sunday morning when I was in the mid-90s. And it was one of the original Pan 60s books as well. So I thought I was not only was I being very cool in getting it, but I was also being very, very arty that I got for a 1960s book. original one. I still have it somewhere, so it's great. But anyway, we're going to talk about Forever and a Day. And to kick us off, we need to kind of get a gist of what the book is about. If you haven't read it, this is your opportunity. So we're going to look to Sean for his synopsis of the book.
Yes, thank you, Kev. Right, here we go. Yes, that's gonna stick, is it?
It's gonna stick. We're gonna keep using that. Yeah.
No problem. Right. Well, Forever and a Day by Anthony Horowitz is a prequel to Ian Fleming's James Bond novels, detailing Bond's first mission as a 00 agent. Set in 1950, the story sees Bond investigating the death of a previous 007 agent on the French Riviera, as well as investigating the lack of drug activity in Corsica. Bond meets 16, a former British operative, who becomes a key figure in his investigation and also leads him to Erwin Wolf, an American millionaire, and John Paul Scipio, the head of a criminal organization. Bond uncovers a plot involving Wolf's Chemical Company, which is a front for a heroin business, and Wolf's new ocean liner, which has been used to ship the heroin to America, along with the involvement of a larger network of organized crime. Ultimately, Bond confronts a larger conspiracy involving the CIA and their involvement with a Corsican crime. The story culminates in a confrontation involving Bond, Scipio, Wolf, and Griffith, and Bond ultimately takes matters into his own hands. The novel explores the darker side of Bond's early career, showing the physical and emotional toll of his first mission. There you go. We're off to the races.
Off to the races. Wow. Thanks, Sean. So let's stick with you actually, as soon as you've gone through there, Sean, and then we'll pass it around. Let's talk a bit about characters. Let's actually get into it, because this is a prequel, I think.
Yes.
But it is. There's nothing. There is a prequel. And so Bond is a different Bond. We always say Bond is a different Bond in all these books, but he is a different character here, isn't he?
Yes, he is. Big time. This is James Bond setting out after the World War, joining the Secret Service and trying to make his way up. Bond's aspiration is to become a 00. He really wants to become a 00. So he's working his way towards it. And what better way to become a 00 than to take over another agent who has unfortunately been killed, and Bond is sent out on a mission. And we're introduced straight away to all the traits of what Bond will become in terms of going to M's, call someone to M's office, getting a mission, talking to Chief of Staff, and then Bond is out on a mission. So he's new, young, he's brash, but that Bond that we all know and love is already there. He's already contemplating certain things. There's a lot of inner dialogue. He's learning a lot on his way, and he's green. Like he's able to go in and investigate and go through the previous 007's house, but then he's caught. He walks in the room, his senses only kick in after he realizes somebody's behind him. So he's still green, he's still very fresh, but he's a James Bond we all love and know.
Fraser, any thoughts on that, on how Bond is?
Yeah, I think there's a certain element of Horowitz does paint him as quite a raw character initially, doesn't he? And but also, he sort of alludes to the fact that he's a little bit different. He's been damaged by the loss of his parents at 11. There's mentioned of that, and that keeps him slightly detached in a certain way. But yeah, I think he's a brilliant. Actually, I know Horowitz is such an accomplished writer, but I think for him to sort of, when you read it, you sort of can feel that it's the same guy, albeit earlier on. And it's, yeah, I think it's a terrific novel to be brutally honest.
Yeah. It's a big
maybe
thing
the best
for
Horowitz ones, really, but I don't know.
Yeah. No, I completely agree, because in terms of Horowitz being able to sort of blend seamlessly into Fleming's writing, it just the way he can carry it off is amazing. It's very, very good.
He picks up some of the greatest hits there, doesn't he? The martinis and the French Riviera and the fast cars and and the almost certain death that he's approaching a couple of times in the book, but does it in a little bit of a different way. I think it's fantastic.
It's prequel. I mean, he's prequel Bond, and I know we've seen a lot of over the years of the beginning. You know, we saw it in Casino Royale. We've got a new video game coming out. I mean, is there anything there in terms of do you like how he's been reintroduced to kind of how he's getting his 00 and how the whole situation comes and we find Bond, you know, not just getting the first kill, but then again the second kill at the beginning. Is there any thoughts to that? Because we've seen that before, and I'm just wondering, is it fresh or is it a bit similar?
I think it's definitely fresh. It's definitely fresh. It sort of sets Bond up. Yes, we all know, but it actually gives you the background. It sort of drills into the detail of how the two kills are completely different, but how, like, Bond, like, the second kill is up close and personal, and Bond is judge, jury, and executioner for that. Like, Bond doesn't have to interrogate. He doesn't have to question, but Bond wants to know for himself before he makes that kill. And that's an early sort of interpretation of what that character will become. And I think Horowitz, because he's definitely, it's Bond, like, he's an assassin at heart, you know, but there's also that sense of duty. He wants to make sure he's avenging the death of the agents in World War II. It's a sense of duty, and, like, it's personal for him in one a bit way, because later on M quizzes him and Bond says, I want to know for myself. I wanted to know before he done this. So yeah, I think it's a fresh way of the character. We know the story, we know the two kills become a 00, but it just gives you a brand new, fresh light on how Bond is sort of like running through his mind.
That's a really good point, Sean. The very fact that when he goes on the second kill, you know, he doesn't just kill the guy. There's almost that slight rebellious bit where he doesn't just kill the guy. He wants to talk to him. He wants to justify his own actions, even though he really wants to be a 00, and that's what he wants. And his mate 007 has been killed, and he clearly alludes to the fact he was a friend. You know, and that obviously happens later on, where he gets taken on as 007 and all that. But the fact that he does the second kill, but actually doesn't just kill the guy straight away. It's almost like he wants to have a reason to do it other than somebody telling him to do it. Do you know what I mean? So I think that's really, it's a really good point, Sean.
But I also think it could have been easy for Horowitz to almost kind of make Bond this kind of different character who eventually evolves into what we know as James Bond in the books. But I think what Horowitz does actually really well is you're introduced to Bond, and Bond's already kind of, you know, it's Bond. He's already very meticulous. He is very deliberate about stuff. The way he even showers and eats and stuff. He already has that in him. It's only the going on missions and the danger that brings, which is new to him. Because he could have, I think, you bring up, say, maybe the video game, that looks like it's going to be a very, hi, I'm a young, very energetic, brash Bond, very charismatic. Look at me, I'm an unpolished diamond. Whereas this Bond, I think he's basically already polished. He just needs that little last buff, which is his first mission, which I think was really refreshing to read, because you think maybe the instinct would be to kind of make him feel a good bit different, so that maybe the change is more deliberate when you go to read Fleming's books. But no, it's like this is Bond as we know him, but it's just the start of that process, you know.
I guess it's because of the era it's set in, you know, only sort of 5 years after the end of the war. You kind of, a lot of those young men grew up really quickly in the war, didn't they? And I guess Bond is no different. You know, it's alluded to the fact that he was already working as some sort of agent before the war. You know, I think that's touched on in Casino. But the fact that obviously that wartime experience of being a commando has you know, given him the edge and made him not afraid of certain situations. And as you say, it's, you know, he's not a kid. He's not like, you know, we're not talking about young Bond here. We're talking, you know, he's definitely ready to go, isn't he? He just is a bit rough around the edges because he's just not the experience of these kind of missions, maybe. I don't.
Yeah, I like that point, because he's Bond, but he's discovering still. There's still an element of learning. I know Horowitz kind of puts that in. You're learning with him as he goes. And I know there's little bits where oh, that's where this happens, or that's where that he picks up that kind of particular trait. But he's a learning Bond as well.
100%. Yeah, but we also see straight away when he wants the 00 number, as in 007. One way he's not fussed, but the other way, let's send a message. We're coming back. We're here. We're going to keep coming. And I think it's Bond all over. I think it's all over. It's great. Love it.
Yeah, the tenacity of him, isn't it? He just keeps going, doesn't he? Even when the odds are against him and, he's physically against it, or, even just facing clearly a definite death, which doesn't normally happen. But yeah, he just keeps going, doesn't he?
Yeah, 100%.
So we like. What about Madam 16? I'm worried I never pronounced her name rightly. Madam 16. What's Michael? What are your thoughts there with her? Do you think she's does she hold her own in the story, or does she? I don't know.
Yeah, I
I
really like the idea of Madam 16, or do we call her Joanne Brochet, or but no, I think it was quite clever from Horowitz to go with a seasoned, as in an older woman for Bond, because if you had, I suppose, the typical James Bond thing where it's a younger female, I think it probably doesn't lend as much interest as having a woman who is in the world Bond is going into. She's been there, done that. Bond, and the idea of Bond learning a lot from her, and Bond is like clearly enamored with her, which I thought was a really cool idea. Like, I really enjoyed Bond smitten with her, and obviously she's seen men like Bond before, but something about Bond, I think she really takes to, which I think is really cool. And like, one of my favorite scenes in the book is their first meeting in the casino, which is a very typical Bond scene, very reminiscent of Tracy and in Majesties and stuff. But I think what I really liked is when she's scoping out Bond, and she asks the question of like, okay, why are you so kind of welcome here? Why is the owner so kind of happy to see you, or whatever? And he's like, oh, I did a favor for him, which is another cool thing I really like about the book, is that it unravels a bit more of Bond's backstory. And I think that sort of thing also kind of garners her respect, being like, okay, this man, he's not just a kind of lost puppy. He's a well-formed man. And I think that's kind of what she really likes. But also, sticking on that story, it's one of those things, I was only thinking about it earlier today, what I really liked is very rarely in kind of a Bond movie does it, or a Bond book or whatever, it kind of just assumes a lot of stuff about Bond, especially with people. So like, do you know, if you're in a movie or the book for Bond, he's walking into a hotel and they know who he is. Like, hello, Mr. Bond. So clearly they know him, they have a previous relationship. But I like how this book gives an insight into what a normal relationship for Bond, we wouldn't normally care about him and a owner of a casino. But we get that insight into Bond did a favor for this guy, hence why he's in good graces with him, which I think is actually a quite cool dynamic to Bond's character. So that maybe when you're watching a movie or reading a book and Bond already knows someone, there's a story behind that. It's not just he's kind of world-renowned famous spy, he's James Bond, oh, look at him. It's, no, Bond probably, there's something happened there with the relationship, which I thought was really cool. But yeah, I completely diverted off your point about Madam 16.
You like her, right? It's just, she's good.
Yeah, she's pretty good.
But I also like the way Madam 16 is near used as showing Bond the ways of the world, for want of a better word. I like that concept. You don't often see Bond, a younger Bond, with like an older sort of lady, and he seems to be learning a lot from her. Like, this is a character who has been through the World War, been betrayed, tortured, is very guarded, doesn't trust anybody, and is always suspicious, and then she's moved into the spy world of selling secrets. And I think that's a great character for Bond to fall in with and start learning, and also for want of a better way, then really learn and respect. And like, it's not often that it's a female showing Bond how to do things. And like, obviously we'll talk later on probably about certain tropes that Bond picks up that we see throughout the rest of the series. But I love the way that this character has a real backstory, how sort of was, as I was saying, betrayed and tortured, and then obviously just works for all sides, but is making a living out of, sort of turned her whole life around. And like, I think that's a great sort of way of a Bond. The character of Bond will soon to be is always downfalls, but gets up again, keeps going. So yeah, I love the way Horowitz uses that character to influence and develop the character of Bond.
He like I say, he's learning about it. Fraser, any thoughts on Madame 16 before I ask a slightly controversial question to everybody?
Yeah, I like the fact she's older than him. She's also, you can't entirely trust her. I like that because that adds a bit of, excitement to the whole interaction whenever he's with her. He doesn't know whether he can trust her entirely, and she similarly is so sort of, so far down the line in her profession that she can't. She knows that to trust somebody fully is risking your life, isn't it? So there's that whole thing where neither one can entirely trust each other until the experiences are so strong that actually they just naturally start to later on. But yeah, as a character, I quite like the fact that, and you get this with Fleming writing, that there's very rarely a throwaway character with no backstory. Most of them have got a history. Most of them have got something going on, and she's no stranger to that. Her story is quite well fleshed out as to how she got to do what she was doing, and there's a couple of things I think I slightly felt a little bit shooed in. The shaken not stirred martini that she introduces is just like, okay, all right, so you got that from her, okay. And then there's the Moreland specials with the 3 gold bands. Oh, we got that from her as well. For me, that felt a little bit unnecessary because it sort of, well, it is an unnecessary thing. There's enough going on there that we don't have to, have her paint the road to his, idiosyncrasy so much. I think there's probably some of those, but for me, felt a little bit shoehorned in, and perhaps that maybe wasn't the intention, but it certainly felt a little bit jarring, some of those bits, because I quite like the idea that Bond got these cigarettes in the war when he was a lieutenant commander, and he just could kind of like all people of his age, smoke like a trooper, and that's where the best ones were for. That's what he got, a kind of thing. I just got this idea of him sort of, traveling through London in the war, trying to buy a packet of special fags. It just seemed, but now he's got it from. Do you know what I mean? I think he's smoking a completely different brand, isn't he? But there's lots of things like that with Bond. He's driving a Jag at one point, and then sort of, you think, well, he's, XJ 220 or something out of some old Jag, which we've never heard of before. So that's a nice little showing. There's quite a lot of backstory there, so I'm not sure we needed necessarily all the add-on bits. But I guess it's not a deal breaker, is it? It's just me being an old fart.
No, but I take your point, Fraser, because like there's certain things that I like Bond is looking at buying a Rolls Royce or whatever it is, or a Bentley. Sorry, he's looking at buying a Bentley. He's sort of thinking, can I afford that? I'll keep looking at it and talk to the mechanic. And like, I actually really like the way the title of the novel is sort of presented in terms of the cigarette case. The Forever and a Day, was wrote on it. I like the way that happens. I take your point. I've always assumed that Bond throughout the war found the 3 gold bands, and he did all that, or the shaking and stirred. It was happening in some casinos some evening. So that's a wee bit different. I take your point entirely.
I like the fact that she she alludes to the fact that she knows that actually conventionally shaking that martini is not what people do, and she does it because it's not what people do. I kind of like that because I've got a bit of a history in my office for not doing what I'm told, so I don't like being told what to do. So I can completely sympathise like that. If you want to get me to do something, tell me to do the opposite. I'm like a child sometimes, so I can get how that mentality works. How, she's saying, I know people say this isn't how you do it, but this is how I do it because they tell me I shouldn't because my late husband did it, whatever. And Bond sort of picks up on that, and I think there's a certain rebelliousness in Bond that, although he's quite not a conservative character, but he's quite a straight character in some respects and quite a traditionalist. He also is a bit of a doesn't like being told what to do, and he does rebel quite a lot. Sometimes in small ways, sometimes in big ways, but he doesn't always do exactly as he's told. I like that.
Let's talk about the baddies then. Let's get into them. Is it Scipio? Sean, how did you pronounce it earlier? Scipio?
Jean-Paul Scipio.
Scipio. See, I always get the C catching me. Scipio and Wolf.
I have to say a quick shout out because I listened to the audiobook this time. So that's how I can pronounce his name. So we were just literally chatting about that earlier on. I have to quick shout out to the audiobook by Anthony Gould. Really enjoyed it. It's a fantastic reading of the novel. Literally fly through the novel when we were listening to the audiobook this time. I think Fraser, Michael, you may have listened to it as well via the audiobook. Definitely recommend the audiobook version of this novel. Excellent reading of it.
Yeah, it brings it to life really well. And there's certain. I mean, I try and whenever I've got a new Bond book, I always read it first, and it's amazing when you listen to the audiobook. Of course, you can do it in the car and whatever. When you listen to the audiobook, how it refreshes it and brings certain bits to life that you perhaps maybe didn't really get into in the first reading, and things like pronouncing names and things like that is that's just prime. I'm forever mispronouncing names when I read stuff. When I was a kid, I was just in the sort of early 80s reading these things. I was never getting the names right, or words, but you just gloss over it. You remember the next bit. When you got an audio, somebody does all the hard lifting for you, don't they?
Oh, big time. I was thinking, Michael, when you were chatting earlier on about reading Casino Royale, that was whenever I read it the first time, half the stuff I didn't understand. It was only when I listened to the audiobook. Oh, that's what they're talking about. Or all the French sort of terms and phrases going. I just glazed over them the first time I read it. So yeah, the audiobook lends a brand new story, breathes a lot new life into the novels. I definitely recommend listening to the audiobooks of any of the novels, to be honest with you.
Have you all? Is there only one audio back out there? Is that the one that Matthew Good read, or is there another one? I only know of that one, but I know the Fleming stuff's had several different authors, but several different readers. But yeah, okay.
I think so. As far as I know, Fraser, yeah.
Well, he apparently went for Bond at one point, but fluffed up the audition. Apparently,
yes, I did hear that.
There's a little clip on YouTube. Yeah. Apparently, he went on and on about how Bond should be a hard drinking, smoking, slightly suspicious substance abuse. Clearly psychologically damaged based on the books. And they went, "Oh, thanks very much."
Next.
Yeah. But I think he would have been really good. A few years ago. I think he's certainly got a look about him. I don't know whether he could carry some of the humour that you need to have some of on the cinema.
Yeah.
I think his reading this is really good. It's one of the best ones I've heard of all the audiobook readings.
I agree. Wholeheartedly agree. Yeah.
And before Kevin jumps in and gives out to us for not answering the question.
It's actually a good point, though, in terms of the audiobook, because that's a great place. I will go now and learn how to pronounce wolf. I can manage it. It's a grand old Irish word, their name. It's not a problem. But sorry, Michael.
But no, I think I quite like that there's kind of almost two completely different villains in especially appearance. You kind of have the big brute kind of, he's not really a henchman, but he's not really a main villain either in Scipio, who who I think gets a really kind of cool trait of, you know, the way Fleming used to give all these villains traits. This guy is just monstrously obese and can't speak English, not because he can't, it's because he refuses to, which I think is really kind of a very villain thing. As like, I'm going to kind of be stubborn enough so to not learn English, so he goes everywhere with a translator, and the fact his voice is kind of gone. It's I think he's really cool, and I think he plays the intimidation factor with Bond. I like that aspect, because we generally, you get with Bond villains is hello, Mr. Bond, and it's almost the friendly banter before you kind of see their true colors. Scipio is just a mean. I wanted to say the C word there, but he's just a mean man, and he just kind of
It's before 9 o'clock, Michael. Before 9
yeah.
o'clock.
I've 8 minutes here, so but when Bond kind of instantly meets him, it is in a situation of peril, and Bond is kind of, they're already at odds, and they're not kind of playing the friendly game, and he just kind of straight up says to Bond, is like, you're no problem to me, I can get rid of you. And he doesn't really even give him much acknowledgement. And then you have Erwin Wolf, who is very typical kind of Bond. Rich man wants to do bad thing, and Bond has to stop him. But I also think, like, I like his motives, because it could just be, I'm an evil man who wants to take over the world. But no, he actually has, like, he has quite a good kind of moral compass with, no, the Americans, what they did to my sons, I want to get them back for this. That wasn't on. So I quite like that as a bit of character motivation. And again, the way Good reads his lines, I think it's quite fun how he does the American accent. You kind of get a good picture of what he looks like. Even you can just frame it in your head of the type of man he is. So I'm quite a fan of both villains.
It's the first time I've ever heard a Bond villain have a good moral compass in terms of what he wants to do. But I know what you mean. Yeah,
his internal logic I like.
Yes,
because best villains are the ones who think they're right. And this guy has in his opinion, in his mind, he is 100% valid in the reasons he's doing this, which I quite liked.
And he's also sort of spurred on by the cancer or whatever that he's got, isn't he? And he's kind of knows the clock's ticking, and he's got nothing to lose. I think that's that. I don't know about you. I sort of liken the character a little bit to sort of like, you know, Milton Crest or something in the book. You know, he's clearly got that sort of quite powerful, wealthy American bit, and he's on a yacht as well. And you know, for me, he is a really good point about his motivation. It's rarely that you see a villain's motivation just so, maybe not quite as you know, not correct, but there's a very strong motivation why he's like that. It's not just. What did you guys think of the American character? Is it Griffith?
Yeah, I was going to get on to him towards the end, because I think the ending is actually one of the things in this book, which I can imagine would be kind of a bit controversial for people in the way the ending happens. And he's a character who's brought up very quickly, and is kind of, you almost think reading it at the start, oh, this is just Felix Leiter, basically. Why isn't it Felix? Because it seems like maybe the obvious thing to do, but I'm happy it wasn't. And like the kind of reveal later on, after Bond puts the pieces together, that Reed, while he wasn't behind the whole plot, he had his hand in it, and he was kind of always there. And Bond kind of killing him is a bit of a kind of, well, this is his first big cold blood moment where he didn't have to do it. And I like the line in the book where he's like, it says he committed murder. Whereas all these kills up until then, he had a license. He was kind of doing it for the government. There was a purpose behind it. This one was just Bond killed him in cold blood. He murdered him. So I think for that aspect, like, the American character. It was very kind of what you'd expect out of kind of a Felix Leiter type of character, who's probably a bit more jovial than Bond, and I don't know, I suppose he kind of very typical in that sense. But I like the reveal at the end, and I think it's also he's not just, the temptation might be to go the reveal of like, oh, he's the main villain all along. It's not. It's he genuinely was just doing a job, and he just got on the wrong side of Bond. So that's another thing I really liked about Reed, is that he wasn't this conniving kind of like, yes, James, I did it, and I'm the reason for. I suppose I was going to say I'm the reason for all your pain, but
Oh, jeez.
Here we go.
Different chat.
But I like how he is just basically is like, yeah, like I didn't mean for this to happen, but like I was doing my job, stuff happened, and Bond, he doesn't react emotionally to it. He's emotionless in the way he kills him, which I think is I'm a big fan of.
I can imagine that took him completely by surprise as a character. Do you know? I bet he thought, oh, I've fessed up now. We'll all be good.
He's like, yeah, he paid his all already. He's like, come on, we're going to get a drink, James. No bother.
Yeah.
But do you think that's a representation of America, Cold War-esque? We'll go with the good guys. It'll all work out in the end. We're just going to take over, and we'll go with the best man. And sure, it'll all work out in the end. It's all good.
Totally, all that stuff they did in Laos and Cambodia was
like sort of
totally shadowy in that time, wasn't it?
Yeah, like we're the good guys, and whoever the good guys are, whoever ends up winning, we'll side the side that wins. So James, it's all good. Sure, come on ahead. What can you do? But they're in the middle of everything, and I know it's set in the 1950s. We're in Corsica. Like America's trying to get their way in. Obviously, everything's coming back in terms of all the drugs and everything else, but they're just trying to get into this place, rule it, let whatever mayhem happens. But as long as everything's okay, America's not getting touched in a world domination type thing. It's definitely like a Cold War-esque espionage is starting. We're playing all sides. It's like the term comes to my head. We're playing both sides for fools. It'll all work out in the end. America will always come on top. Bond at the very end smells a rat, and I love what you say there, Michael. It's personal. It's murder. He knows what he's doing, and it's one for us. And you kill one of ours, we're going to take one of yours.
All right. Yeah. Let's talk. So let's move on from the characters a little bit, and because it's all sounding fantastic. What's the niggles about the book? What doesn't work as well? Is there any particular moment that made you go, oh God, why? Who wants to jump in?
That's a very good question, Kev. Do you know what I found was, and this is a niggle. It's not an issue at all with the book. Jesus, now you put me on the spot. I found it slightly. I can see what Horowitz was doing. Whenever Bond is infiltrating the chemical factory, and Madame 16 is leading the way, and I'm picking holes. It's very hard, but very conveniently, her people turn up. Very conveniently, they're Bond and that are about to be caught, but they just happen to be there and they all escape, and nobody knows anything. Nobody's the wiser. It's small. It's very small. Where I was picturing, and do you know what I pictured when I was reading it? I pictured Connery and Goldfinger going through the forest with the binoculars to look at Goldfinger's factory. That's what I was picturing.
Yeah. I was the same in that. Actually, I thought of really? Goldfinger. Yeah.
And I was just expecting sort of slightly more, and then two guards come, Madame 16's people turn up, and you know what? In a roundabout way, and I'm probably arguing against myself here. I like that she's been watched. She has people who look after her that Bond is unaware of, but it was like there was peril there, and very quickly was taken away. That was in my head leading to, the cat's out of the bag. Bond and 16 are together. Walt's going to find them. That was a wee bit just. I'm picking holes, and it's very.
It's niggles. It's small little things. No, it's just little things. Just to see. Anyone else?
I think that's a really good point. I must admit that it was a bit odd for me how they just rocked up and saved the day. But just alluding to what I was saying before, the fact that it feels like they were quite deliberately starting things in the book that were already in the Fleming world. So you kind of that for me. But I did like the fact that he, talked about May and the fact that his housekeeper had it. She worked with him for a year, and pretty quickly knew that he was what he was and didn't care. And the fact that he's, there's all that backstory. I like the fact that we're not just talking about a completely fresh world for Bond. It's all quite familiar. He's already going to the building in Regent's Park. He's just going to a different floor. But the niggles for me were like, do we really need to have the origin of certain tropes of like the shaken up stir, like the cigarettes, things like that? Do we really need that signposted quite as much as we did? But it's only a little niggle. It's only a little niggle.
Like I'd be completely lying if I said I had any niggles. And I think I'm coming at this with a bit of bias because it is my favorite Bond book more than any of the Flemings, because I think I read it at the right time.
Cool.
So when I read all the Fleming books, I was still kind of, I suppose, learning a lot of things. But when this book came out, it was in 2018, as far as I remember, and I was just out of school and stuff. So you feel like you're kind of, I'm getting on a bit, maybe, as in like I'm advancing out of my teen years, and I read the book and I was just absolutely floored by it. I adored it. And then, unbeknownst to me, about a year or two later, I picked up a Sherlock Holmes book in the charity shop, read the whole thing, absolutely loved it. Looked at the front cover. Oh, it's written by Anthony Horowitz. And I'm like, oh, wow. And kind of because of that, Horowitz is one of the few people, no matter what book he releases, I'll buy and read. He's one of the only authors. Generally, I always buy books related to things I like franchises or stuff. I very rarely buy, kind of standard novels, which are just novels. But he's the only person, because of how much I loved Forever and a Day, and how much I loved the Sherlock Holmes book, The House of Silk, it's called. It's a fantastic book. Oh, it's a really good book. So I kind of credit Horowitz with a lot of that, with me almost appreciating the literary, not just literary Bond, but literature in general a bit more, because he's one of the few authors I'll actually kind of read. So I have a lot of reverence for Forever and a Day. It's my favorite Bond book. It's the one I think about the most if someone ever brings up the literary Bond. I'll generally bring up bits in Forever and a Day I love, certain scenes and stuff. So yeah, I'd be completely lying if I said I had any problems with the book.
Obviously, Kev, I'm going to turn it back on yourself. What are your thoughts? What are your niggles? What do you think?
My niggles are, I suppose, I sometimes I feel like I'm trying, and maybe it's intentional. Madam 16 sometimes just annoys me a little bit with the duality of well, maybe I am, maybe I'm not. Kind of element mysterious. I just feel it kind of goes on a little bit longer than needed. And I did find when I was reading it, I was going a bit, oh, here we go again. And I was almost starting to go into, my mind was starting to go into the kind of, is this a sort of a Vesper, but not a Vesper in terms of an interest for Bond, but just in terms of well, can you trust her, can you not trust her, and pulling that string a little bit more. So I think that was mostly kind of a niggle I had throughout reading it. Now, again, like you, Sean, and it's such a minor, it's that really tiny minor niggle. It wasn't stopping enjoyment, because it's a great book. But yeah, that and a little bit of the shoehorning of kind of canon into it in terms of the cigarettes and the vodka martini, I thought was a little bit, that's a bit convenient. I want Bond to kind of discover this, or say have a backstory even to that, to how he comes across this, rather than just, I met this woman once there in France and she bought me a drink and that's all I drink now.
Yeah, yeah. They were probably my biggest niggles about it.
Yeah, but
And they are
small
small.
niggles.
Yeah.
The question
But
I might jump in, and the question I was going to say: does anyone have a particularly favorite scene in the book? Because I think the book has one of my favorite scenes in any Bond medium is when he's captured by Scipio and he's tied to the chair and the
Yes.
interrogation. And it's the fake out of Bond thinks, and it's going through his head, and he's almost preparing himself for the worst, and he just gets water thrown on him instead of acid. And like, to me, that was such a clever. Like, I remember reading when that first, and I thought, it's like, what's going on here? But I think it leans so much in on kind of Bond's, I suppose. Fraser mentioned it earlier. Bond is one of the most resilient characters, especially in the book. The man's willpower, I think, is probably his greatest strength. And like in a lot of Fleming books, he's always getting into the absolute worst of kind of situations. And I like how in the book, this was the first of those. And while he will get into even more precarious situations, this was almost the starter of like, it's only going to get worse from here. So Bond has probably been in
spoiler, Michael, spoiler.
Yeah. Bond has been in situations like that before, but this is the first time we see him. And I like the way it's a psychological thing as well. They're not just, because you could have easily written that as like Bond gets interrogated by Scipio and they kick the crap out. But it's not. It's a purely psychological thing. It's like, no, we're going to throw water on you, teaching you a lesson.
And there's that whole thing where he literally is saying it's burning and this, that, and the other, and then
and I like how Horowitz writes in his head that it's the kind of placebo effect of he thinks he's thinking all this stuff, which I think is really cool.
Man, it's like an impossible situation for him, isn't it? You think as a reader, you think, how's he going to get out of this? This is not going to go well. I clearly know he doesn't get burned with acid, so how's this going to work? So when the stuff's thrown on you, there's a split, you're reading it, you think, and then he starts to burn and you think, oh, what's going on, And it makes me think of like in Goldfinger, with the buzzsaw, the book, and he's kind of the buzzsaw's inching towards him, up the table, and clearly he can't move, he can't get away, and all he can think about is trying to knock himself out by holding his breath or somehow willing himself to go unconscious, and he can't do it because the body keeps fighting back, and it's an impossible situation, and that feels very much like this. He can't get out of it, and then something else happens and he's away from it. It's kind of it's brilliant. I think how that's done. You're right, Michael. Brilliant.
Any other scenes from people that they really enjoyed?
I have to say, it's probably very descriptive and the way Bond is feeling, but when he's been caught and Scipio and as well as the doctor is going to inject him with heroin or whatever it is, definitely the way it's described, Bond turns out to be helpless and he's trying to fight it for all his worth, but it's happening. And just the way Horowitz describes them feelings, the way the drugs are getting into his system and it's all going to happen. And we're just going, like, in your head going, how is Bond getting into this? He's helpless. And I actually, in a roundabout way, and you had mentioned Vesp earlier on, Kev, I keep thinking of Tracy in this novel for some reason. That she comes back and, 16 is the person who actually has the cop on, the knowledge to cut the blood flow in Bond's arm, try and cut out, sort of bleed him, like not bleed him out, but try and get all the heroin out of his system. I just think Horowitz sets it up so good. Like, Bond is helpless. Like, we're reading this, but I was actually engrossed in this part of the novel because we all know there's X amount of novels to come, but I found Bond in real peril, real struggling, and again he relies on somebody else, and a 16 who comes and helps him, and that character has a bit of a pivot, as we were saying earlier on. she's playing both sides. She's working, don't know who to trust. She sees something in Bond, and I just love the way Horowitz sets that up. I think it's excellent because when he's in the chair, you're expecting to see the acid this time, but it's not. Scipio has a whole different plan. I'm gonna like even the thought of using a human body to go with drugs, addict them, just use them for whatever ends necessary. I think it's a brilliant way a villain will use to torture somebody. You know, I love the way Horowitz sets that up. I love it. It's very descriptive. You just not that you see it, you just feel it, and then it all turns. I love the way that happens. I have to say,
I'm the same as you. Actually, that was my exact same answer. Not, I was horrified reading it, and I think it was more the first one. You know, you'll be dependent on it, but by about a few days' time, you will be a shell of who you are. And we're like, this is Bond. Is it the same Bond who's dangerous and on a mission, determined? We've gone through the kills. And you're right, the acid, I think, is very much it sets up that part of it later. And yeah, I was just turning the page throughout. And again, he'd come out of it. Well, he should come out of it. Casino Royale's got to happen. But at the same time, is there something else that is in here? Or something that causes it or gives him a psychological weakness? Or it's a fantastic, tense part of the book, and it's the one thing that I walk away from going, wow, that was some section of it for sure. Yeah.
I really like the bit towards the end where he sort of he takes things up to the next level, and instead of just sort of defeating the villain, he wants to sink the ship, and like, and she's sort of, he's clearly got that whole thing where he's put, because he's like a really good, Bond as a character observes things very well, and sometimes there are things that the reader kind of gets. It's like the fire hydrants in it. Why has he got so many fire hydrants? And that sort of, that little thing is dropped quite early on when he gets on the ship, and Bond knows there's something wrong with that. Why has he got so many fire hydrants? And then later on, of course, then it's revealed that the drugs are being smuggled in those things, and then he sort of thinks, well, the best thing to do is sink the ship then. I'm not sure that'd be everyone's go-to route to defeat the villain, but, and he sort of, and then he thinks, well, there must be a main sort of stopcock or whatever the hell thing it's called, the sea drain, that'll be in there somewhere. So and I just think that's brilliant. So she becomes from early on the book where she's clearly got the upper hand and kind of has all the answers. She's like looking across, and you can see that as a character, she's going, Christ, is this guy mad? What are we doing now? And she becomes. He definitely starts taking the lead, which is a change from earlier on in the book where she's clearly got the upper hand. So, I just think the whole thing was brilliant.
Yeah. So we're coming up on time. I do want to ask: does this and then get your ratings of the book, and how does the book compare to the first Bond book you read? I think Michael already has given us the answer to that for him, but anyway, we'll do it. Does this, looking forward to, how does this set up Casino Royale now when you look at it in terms of a linear timeline, guys? How well, or does it matter? Fraser, I'll let you there.
Okay, no. For me, it probably is a much better sort of setup and entry into the series, and feels very much like a natural prequel to Casino without feeling clunky, and you could almost, and I've got no massive problem with most of the young Bond stuff, but you could almost ignore some of that early stuff and consider this as really the first entry. I know people love a lot of people love the young Bond stuff, but it's not all gold. It's not all hurricane gold. But you kind of for me, it definitely feels like a really good, and all of Horowitz's bits are like that. They also segue into, and they don't try and create a whole new thing. They definitely want to be companion pieces to what comes after or whatever. And I think this book does that really well. really well. Much better than when it was announced. I thought it would be. I must admit. I was confident about the writing, but I just thought, well, how are they going to do that? They're going to try and, do this young Bond all over again, but without it, don't know. Not that I've got a massive problem with that, but for me, I wanted to see a mature adult Bond for a prequel book if they were going to do it, and they did that. I think they did that really well.
Yeah,
Cool. Sean, anything to add to that?
Yep. I'd echo that in terms of how big a challenge it was for Horowitz falling into the Fleming style of writing. I find this novel is seamless is a strong word, but it sort of flows lovely into the Fleming style. And obviously he did this with Trigger Mortis in terms of fitting in from Goldfinger onwards. But I find a brand new person coming and reading these novels could pick up Forever and a Day and then pick up Casino Royale and may not know the difference of who the author is. And that's a real big feat for somebody who's coming in X amount of years later, trying to make it fresh, but also trying to write it within the Fleming tone, the Fleming style. And I think Horowitz has done a brilliant job. He sort of fleshes out the Casino Royale story in terms of the Bond that we know. He gives us more of a background. I think he does an excellent job. And honestly, if you were to give this to somebody now and say read that, they may see this as the first Bond novel, which is a pretty big statement. But I think Horowitz brings it off and carries it off brilliantly. Love it.
Cool. Michael?
Yeah, like the other thing I was thinking of, what I liked about the book, I think like it could have been tempting to write a prequel book and try to kind of almost subvert the formula. But what it is a very formulaic Bond in terms of he gets the mission, goes there, investigates. It is quite paint by numbers, but in the absolute best way possible, because it almost feels like this is like the template for what you kind of associate with Bond. And there's bits like you can almost, the way you were saying is like, oh, I pictured Goldfinger in that bit. And like when they're going and investigating, him and Reed are going investigating the office, it's like, oh, I'm thinking of like License to Kill when him and Sharky are going to Milton Crest and kind of they're scoping out there. You can almost visualize it through the movies in your head, which I think if you were a new person coming into it, you can almost see the book, which I think is quite cool. But yeah, no, I'm a huge fan. Obviously, what I was going to say is, where does it rank for you within the Horowitz trilogy? Because I think it's kind of cool that he started in the middle, then went to the start, and then went to the end. So he's written for basically throughout Bond's. He's picked 3 kind of distinct areas of Bond, and it's my favorite of Horowitz's. But I think that a lot of that is sentimental reasons rather than maybe quality reasons. I think it is probably his best, but also when I first read Trigger Mortis, again, I was younger and I didn't fully really get on board. Like I enjoyed it, but I didn't fully absorb it. And then with A Mind to Kill, I read, and I really loved it, but there was always the niggling feeling of it's not as good as Forever and a Day, though. You almost try to recreate the magic, even though I think it is it is really good. Granted, I need to reread it. I haven't read it in a while. I didn't read it since it came out, but I remember really liking it. So where does it rank for you among the Horowitz trilogy? I'll say Fraser first.
Top of the tree, really. I think it's. I think the whole series, maybe just in order of release. I think it just gets, the best was at the beginning. Trigger. I mean, I love the whole thing of Bond being on the edge of the racing scene. I've had an on-off relationship with a Bond fan fiction I've been writing for 20 odd years, and it's definitely set in that world because it feels quite Bondian. So I quite like the fact that that's got that flavouring. But for me, it's probably Forever and a Day is the best out of the three. I kind of feel they should have maybe done another one, but set it more in like the Caribbean or something, because that becomes its own character with Bond novels, doesn't it? When he's done stuff out there, whereas, yeah, I think Forever and Day is the best one about the three. I mean, one thing we haven't really drawn on is the fact that there is original source material, which was definitely had access to and did for the first two books, and I think that in itself adds a certain sort of weight to the first book, because he really does feature that stuff in there from Fleming. So for me, that's always a win.
Sean?
Yeah, just to back up Fraser's point, I love the way Horowitz can weave in unreleased Fleming material. He's a fan. He's all into it. I love that. I have to say, Forever and a Day was probably the first continuation novel that grabbed me, and I loved the novel to the point where I need to read this again. I think Horowitz is an excellent writer. All three novels are very good, but Forever and a Day for me is right up there to the point it's one of the best Bond novels of them all, I have to say. I think the way he captures the Fleming-esque sort of writing, the way he puts Bond in a certain setting, and I think it's a brilliant prequel to the Fleming novels. Give me more Horowitz, to be honest with you. I love it. I have to say, he's an excellent writer, excellent Bond novelist. Forever and a Day is number one of the Horowitz novels for me. Yeah, and again, going back to, I love the way he uses Trigger Mortis, and again, he's weaving in Fleming material. He's fitting in after Goldfinger, but reading this novel it just raised the bar again. And like, I'm not disputing any of the previous sort of continuation novelists or writers. This was a bolt out of the blue. This was an excellent novel. 100%. Give me another Anthony Horowitz. Love it.
I'm the same. It's hard to believe it's 10 years since Trigger Mortis landed, and I'm trying to remember parts of it. I mean, I enjoyed it. This is my favorite one, though, Forever and a Day. It's bottled up that magic. I think you've captured it, and despite the niggles and despite the little thing, but you know, it's a great book, and like you, Sean, and I think everyone, more of it. I think Mind to Kill, a little bit more. Yeah, I'm going to guess Forever and a Day. I think we'll be unanimous on this one. This is the book. So if you haven't read it yet, go read it now. Is what I think what we're all saying today.
Yeah,
fair enough, gents. Yeah,
that's 100%. Yeah, we're all in.
All right. Any final parting thoughts, gentlemen, and we'll let our listener get on with their day.
Oh, just love the book. It's one of the. It's I suppose it's the book that I think really, if you're getting into Bond, you owe it to yourself to read this book. Or if you are someone who has never read any of the Flemings and maybe has been putting them off for a while, maybe look at this book and kind of and maybe give it a read, because I actually think it's like you're dipping your toe into the water then. I think it's such an accessible book as well. And I think, like, if you're a reader who maybe isn't as much of an anorak as we are, I think the stuff that Fraser said, like the shaken not stirred stuff and how he gets his cigarettes, I think people might enjoy that. They could look at that and go, oh, I noticed that. And then I think it could kind of lead down a lovely path of, if you like this book, maybe read more literary Bond.
I echo with that entirely in terms of this is a proper Bond thriller. It's set in the 1950s in the French Riviera. Like, that's classic Bond. You know, the settings is unreal. Definitely, again, it's a prequel, but it's an origin tale. It's set in Bond out. It gives us a lot of information of what Bond will become as a character. He's surrounded by a ream of different characters with different elements, different motivations, how Bond picks his way through sort of this tale, and it sets us up, as Michael said. Let's read more of these novels. I love it. Definitely it explores Bond's moral compass, probably gives us a few pointers in terms of what the character of Bond will become further down the line. And yes, definitely give it a go. And final thought, definitely recommend the audio version as well.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, for me, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I'm a huge Fleming reader and purist, but I do think that if someone, I can imagine people like more people than just Michael getting into Bond novels through the writing Horowitz and sort of picking it up because they like the House of Silk or they like the Alex Rider books or whatever, and they get. I can imagine this totally being a route that people get into Bond, particularly the books, and it's a good place to start because, as you say, it's got it all there, the template's there. It doesn't try and break the formula that maybe Michael alluded to this. You could easily imagine a writer going, "Oh, well, I do an origin story. I'll start with him." I'll start with him being in prison and, with long hair, or, I'll do, there will be something. You can imagine somebody trying to break the mold and they don't. They introduce stuff very, they structure it in such a way as you're familiar if you're an old reader of the books, but also if you're jumping on and then you go and pick up Casino or whatever, you're not going to find it jarring. You're going to definitely feel that there's a continuation of something you've already started. So yeah, totally get how people might come to Bond through the books, through this first. Totally.
Okay, well, with that, the book is Anthony Horowitz, Forever and a Day, and you can get it anywhere you get a book. It's easy. You just go online. There you go. Download it, buy it, get it. We all like to have a copy of it. Kent, thank you so much, Sean, Fraser, Michael, for your inputs and insights and so forth. We will have to do this again sooner rather than later, as they say. So for now, we will let you all go. So thanks very much, everyone. Goodbye. We'll see you on the next episode.
Goodbye.
Good luck. Bye-bye.
Bye.